So now we should be live. So if not, let me know. Let me wave in the chat for a moment so we can. All right, so then let's start with this one. Levi, since you edited it, I assume you have context?
I do. You can just hit that link and it'll go straight to the API proposal. It's just a comment here somewhere.
Is that the one?
Yep, that's it. So basically, the ASP.NET team has a scenario where they have a stream that's in one encoding, for instance, UTF-8, and they want to turn it into a stream that's in another encoding, like Shift.js or something along those lines. There are APIs to do this right now, going from byte array to byte array, but there's not an API to do it going from stream to stream. And they need an API that can do stream to stream because they're dealing with streaming data. Like, they don't buffer the entire request or response into memory. So the proposal here is to introduce a type, transcoding stream, which just subclasses stream, and you say from and to, or you give it a stream to wrap and an encoding from and an encoding to. And then you can read from it, write to it, do whatever you need to do. This is actually not all that different than the crypto transform streams in terms of theory.
In terms of no one ever gets it right?
Yeah. So the idea is if you're wrapping, so this is the outer stream. When you wrap an inner stream and then write to the outer stream, we'll decode using the outer encoding and then re-encode using the inner encoding and then write to the inner stream. Or if you're reading, the opposite transformation takes place.
Hold on, I need to visualize.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say this one more time. When you write to the inner stream.
So when you write to the outer stream,
okay,
we decode using the outer encoding that's
Yes.
specified as a parameter there. Then we re-encode using the inner encoding and then write that new data to the input stream. Or when you're reading, the opposite transformation happens. So when you're reading from the output stream, the first thing we do is we read from the input stream, because this is a wrapper. We decode using the inner encoding. We re-encode using the outer encoding, and then we return that data from the transcoding stream read method.
So outer encoding and inner encoding are outer stream encoding and
Yes.
inner stream encoding?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, then
We can rename those.
yeah, I would rename it.
Yeah.
why do we do this over stream, not over text right here?
So there are
That's right.
APIs today to do it just over straight up byte array, go from one encoding to another. And that's great if you have all of the data already in memory, but the ASP.NET team in particular doesn't have all of the data already there. They're streaming the data.
So this one would also handle the case where you read 4K and you happen to just split it by
Yeah.
the show get pairs.
So one of the other scenarios for this is they're using the system text JSON library, which is UTF-8 only. The system text JSON library has the ability to parse over streams of data. Well, that means the incoming data needs to be in UTF-8. But what if the actual HTTP request is not in UTF-8? What if it's in like Big 5 or Shift.js or something? Someone needs to do that conversion before handing it to system text JSON. One way to do it is to read the entire thing into memory, convert one giant byte array to another byte array, and then run it through system text JSON. This is a mechanism where you don't have to load the whole thing into memory because you can do it streaming.
The byte to byte array convert, what encoding is it? Is any arbitrary encoding to any other?
Yes, that API is encoding.convert. It's a static method. But again, it's only byte array to byte array.
It makes sense from the perspective of ASP, but how many other people actually need this?
Presumably the HTTP stack, system.net HTTP might need this if you do have a mechanism that links system text JSON with any of the HTTP request or response types.
Or is adding in this version.
Yeah, so you're going to need this too.
So what am I adding this version?
The stuff of take an HTTP payload and throw it at the JSON deserializer using the extension methods.
Oh, that part.
Yeah, where it could
Like a
use
JSON
this
content
to-
with a custom encoding,
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
Instead of failing the content wasn't already.
Yeah, so your options right now in that library would be either you load the whole thing into memory and then do a conversion all at once, or you fail, or you do this.
Well, we have the APIs available to do it in chunks right now, right? You can new up an encoder.
Yes, but you can't
Yes.
throw that at the JSON serializer, but it will take a stream.
Yeah. So you need, basically you
I
need to
see.
do this anyway.
So somebody would have to do literally that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm suggesting is instead of making this a helper class in ASP.NET, and instead of making this a helper class in system.NET HTTP, just make it a helper class in system text or system IO and make it public.
I think system text actually makes sense to me because that's where encoding lives.
Right, because transcoding is anything that's from one form to another, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, impeg to something else.
What
Um,
would be the performance characteristics of this? Because I think one of the scenarios, I'm reading the thread and they mentioned that we want it to be as in a performant way. We want to do this
It would be O of 1 over the data. What do you mean by performance
It
characteristics?
would be O1, right? It would be ON, right?
But, yeah, O of N, sorry.
Yeah.
A single pass over the data.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just reading what Pranav wrote, like they need to support for an MVC any arbitrary user configured encoding.
Yeah, which you could do. And the thing is, this stream could also special case UTF-8, for instance, because we have more optimized methods for that.
I see.
But aside from special casing those, it would just call into the abstraction.
Do we know that the ASP team will use this? Because they use pipelines in a lot of places now.
They already have something like this internally. So
Okay.
yes, we know they'll use it.
In terms of special casing,
Hey, Steve.
I'm wondering if there are overheads we could avoid by having this be a factory where we might return like a derived UTF-8 transcoding stream or something.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of having the constructor special case.
Well, the constructor, if it's special case, it would create some internal additional type. Is that what you're thinking?
It would. I would assume that the special case would just be whenever you call read or write, it would say if I can go down a fast path method, then do that instead. I'm not quite sure what you mean by having a factory that returns a different stream.
Right. If rather than having every method on this have to check, is my encoding UTF-8, then do X, otherwise do Y, right? If I detect in the constructor, if I detected in the factory that the encoding was UTF-8, I could return a UTF-8 transcoding stream, and then I don't have to do those checks.
So let the
ever again.
virtual dispatch handle it for you then at that point.
That's what I'm asking.
Sure, we could do that. Would we even have this API? Would the transcoding string go away entirely and we just have a static API on system text encoding?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about this. So one thing we need to keep in mind, and maybe that we can hide this away, but if we do that, that means it will be very hard for use for any work that is out of band today.
Yes.
I mean, we can still copy the source effectively and if they have the shit out of it, right? But like if it's a separate type, then at least they have a chance. But this one would make it fairly difficult.
One
but
of the other things you'll notice is this type is sealed. The reason for that is subclassing streams is a pain in the ass because you have virtual methods being added all the time.
yes.
And I was trying to avoid that as much as possible because I haven't thought through what an extensibility model might look like for this. And my default stance on most APIs is seal them until we actually have a documented
Yeah.
extensibility model.
I mean, I would agree with that. I don't think, like, quite frankly, so the problem with the factory method is effectively that nobody else can extend this, right?
Correct.
The only people can only wrap, and wrapping a stream is extremely difficult.
Mhm.
So, if wrapping is a scenario that we think is important, then having a type you can derive from would be easier.
Well, this is a wrapper, but if
No, I'm
we
saying,
have,
like, if
yeah.
you expect somebody else
So
to do
one,
that, then
one downside is if we unseal this type and then people start overriding the virtuals, all of these special casing logic we have for UTF-8, for
Yes.
instance, gets extremely complicated.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we shouldn't. All I'm saying is that's the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
So if we foresee somebody else having to do the wrapping because they have to do something in the middle, then then we have to decide what's more important to us. But I think probably for us, performance will be more important than some corner case scenarios. So I'm inclined to say.
So what if we made it a factory then, like Steve had proposed?
I mean, we could do that. I mean, basically the API would be we would go to what did we say? Encoding probably.
Well, we could put it on system text encoding. I don't know if it would be a bit strange for system text encoding to have on it an API that talks about system.io. Maybe it's not strange. I don't know.
I don't think it's not. To me, it's not that strange. I mean, basically, we have an API that talks about data, right?
Yeah.
So we take spans, we take chars, arrays. Seems to me logical to also take.
If we wanted it, it could still be a sealed class that derives from stream. It would just expose a static method and have a private constructor instead. That would also address the out-of-band concerns.
Yeah, but the problem then is like that also means we can't derive from it either, right?
Yeah, we can.
We can derive from the thing that it.
Yeah.
I guess it can't have an intermediate-based class.
We wouldn't seal it, but we would just give it a private or internal constructor.
Yeah. But at that point, I mean, honestly, whether we make it a static helper method or it seems largely irrelevant.
Well,
I mean, I don't know how much.
If we have a sealed class encoding stream, transcoding stream, and we put a static stream returning, not transcoding stream returning, create method on it, then it can sometimes return if the arguments aren't exactly UTF-16 and UTF-8 in one way or the other, then it'll just be like, okay, whatever, like done. Or it can also do the fun, wait, inner and outer are the same. I'm just going to return inner stream.
Yeah.
I could also be making a mountain out of a molehill. I mean, it's possible the checks that Levi's talking about aren't going to matter at all. So maybe it's worth measuring and seeing if there's actually a benefit to be had.
Yeah. Does anybody have a preference for whether we create a static method on encoding? Because I'm just thinking about it. Like, I think for us, it probably doesn't matter. Like, taking source is not that hard either.
Would you do it as a static method on encoding or an instance method on encoding?
Right
Well, I
now,
would make
there's-
it a static method.
Right now, there's a static method already which converts byte array to byte array, so
Yeah.
this would nicely complement that.
I think I'd prefer a factory unless we can think of how someone might extend this.
If we had a factory, then I would want the factory to be on encoding and not introduce a transcoding stream type at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd rather have fewer types.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So then the question becomes, what do we call the method?
Right. Let's see here.
I was thinking create transcoding stream.
Yeah, that's exactly the name I was going to come up with.
Yeah.
It's like the most straightforward way, but like.
Yep. And then, Jeremy, you had suggested those two encoding parameters need to be outer stream encoding and inner stream encoding.
Yeah, because
Okay.
just outer and inner
Even outer and inner seem weird.
didn't make sense.
Should we say source destination or?
The problem is
Target.
it depends on if you're calling read or write.
Yeah.
Which one's the source and which one's the destination.
Yeah,
So
so-
I was actually looking at the ASP.NET implementation of it. They have a read stream and a write stream.
Yeah. Which we don't tend to have read-only streams and write-only streams in the
Sure we do.
framework.
Almost all of our streams only work in one mode.
Hmm?
If you call file.create read, you can't write to it. If you
No,
call-
but I mean, they have the ability to work in one mode, but we don't necessarily have types that only support one mode or the other.
Sure, so what we could do is we could have just two different
Each
factory
is- yeah.
methods, right?
Yes,
create
create
reading
reading,
stream.
transcoding stream, create writing transcoding
Yes, you
stream.
could do that.
But if in the common case I have a pipe, a single network pipe that I want to both read from and write to, do I now need to create two streams for that?
That's fair. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be hard.
Like, right, so we can do it, but like, CryptoStream, which you made the analogy
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
you tell it, are we doing reading things or writing things? And then it changes its plumbing and it won't let the other one work.
I mean, to be honest, like I don't mind inner outer because I mean that is the nomenclature we use when streams wrap streams, which is not that uncommon.
Yeah, but here it's not about like what's inner and what's outer.
Inner is inner stream, outer is the stream we built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The outer is the wrapper, inner is the wrap.
Yeah.
Rapid.
I see.
Yeah.
Where do we use inner and outer?
Like if you go for I forgot what the thing is. Is it?
There are definitely streams that expose properties called inner
text
stream.
writer? Yeah.
I don't know that we ever talk about the opposite of the inner stream.
Right. I'm just thinking from like if I were to land with this type, I'll have to do this mapping every time because it's hard for me to.
Okay, so maybe we do just create. We have two methods then.
Yeah,
Create,
here's an
read, create,
example.
write.
So we have authenticated stream. It has a property called inner stream.
Right.
Or we
Oh,
have
the
SSL
SSL
stream
thing.
connection, which has an inner stream.
Right, I can buy having
Yeah.
just inner stream.
Yeah.
Right, as the thing that it took as the stream that is wrapping.
So
Right.
even if we had create read stream and create write stream, the parameters would be the same across both methods.
Yeah.
Well,
Coding
then
parameters.
Those 4 parameters would have to be the same for both create reader and create writer.
I mean, because then we could call them source encoding and destination encoding.
That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
And then their meaning just flips in one of those.
Sorry, was the decision to have 2? It seems like an issue for something like, if you were talking about HTTP client using this, because there is only one stream.
You would have to create 2 wrappers around it.
Yeah, which is weird if it.
And
So then you'd have to make a wrapper, a third stream that wraps the 2 streams if you were trying to get back in the we
Yeah.
have one multiplex stream mode.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is fine.
So we can't do source and target even if you have one, or source and destination even if you only have one.
Well, source and destination have different meanings based on whether
Read
you're
and
reading
write.
or writing.
Yeah.
That's why I used inner and outer
Yeah.
here.
So I think it'll take somebody a few minutes to figure out what the thing is, but
Yeah.
even if we split the methods and we get source and destination, I think it still has room for.
I mean, it could also be something like, this encoding and inner stream encoding or something like that.
Something we could also
Yeah.
do to make this easier is right now there's a stream inner stream parameter and an encoding inner stream encoding parameter. If those 2 parameters were adjacent, that might also make it more understandable. Because in this API proposal, they're not
Right,
adjacent.
so create transcoding stream, encoding, outer stream encoding, stream, inner stream encoding, inner stream encoding.
Yeah. So you could swap the first 2 parameters like you had just said.
Uh,
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would help all that much.
Alternatively, we could swap the other 2 because
Yeah.
destination righty thing. Actual source. Yes, the problem is source comes before destination, but what's the source? We don't know.
Or given you have inner stream, yeah, I'll be more in favor of swapping second and third.
I think I would agree with that.
So swap second and third.
Yeah. So basically, it will be inner stream encoding, outer stream encoding, and then leave open.
And leave open just affects dispose behavior, that's all.
Right.
Do you want that parameter leave open?
Most other wrapping streams have that concept.
And every time we don't have one, somebody complains.
Yeah.
And then ask the put. Okay, yeah, sure.
And then they don't have to edit anyway.
Okay.
So is it worth it to have, like we have encoding.utf8 instances and encoding.utf32, have methods like these on those specific encodings?
You couldn't because streams have state.
Yeah. The encoding, there is a concept of a stateful encoding. You call encoding.getEncoder or encoding.getDecoder.
I see.
And that's what this would do. Under the covers, it has to.
Go ahead.
Because if it's given an arbitrary encoding, like I don't know what to do other than go through the public APIs. But it would special case things like UTF-8.
Yeah, and this API lends itself. You could still special case it, right? You special case
yeah.
certain encodings.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. More
And-
in and
Yeah, and the factory method also allows us to return a dummy pass-through stream if you pass the same thing for before and after. We have options, yeah.
So what is the behavior if I, let's say, pass in this same encoding for both inner and outer?
If you pass leave open false, then I literally just return inner stream to you. If you pass leave open true, I wrap it.
Because otherwise, it changes what dispose means.
Another benefit of it being a factory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's an interesting question of would using the encoders
Oh crap, I can't do that, never mind.
be better or worse than just having a small carryover buffer locally?
I take that back, I can't return the inner stream.
Why?
Because the encodings will also fix up data.
Validate it itself.
Yes. If you pass the same encoding, both inner and outer, the actual scenario for doing that is you want to take something that might contain invalid UTF-8, for instance, and what you get on the other side is always guaranteed valid,
The
What would
replacement
you do
character
then?
nonsense?
You replace them with question marks, or what is it?
basically, yeah. Because that's the behavior. The encodings don't round trip all possible data.
And if
So
even
there
if
is a
they
side
give you
effect.
If they gave you the failing encoding, then you would need the exception.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can't.
If
we
we
can't
believe that to be
special
a common scenario, though, you might be able to do a special path for it.
Yeah. Yeah. We could special case it, but we can't just return the input string. Unfortunately, in that case.
Sure.
Yeah.
It could return a special encoding fix-up stream.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a
Oh, yeah,
scenario
Bob.
if somebody has invalid JSON or invalid data and they want to pass in the same stream but do validation?
I can't imagine
Same
people
coding.
would use this API for that, but you could, in theory. Because that's behavior it would have, even had we not special based it.
It's the, you hate that the default is
Should-
use replacement characters.
Should we disallow that and just throw if the encoding is the same?
You wouldn't
There's
know.
no reason to disallow it.
For our built-in ones, there are questions we can ask, but
Yeah.
The non-built-in ones, you don't know what it's going to do.
Yeah, like it's, in general, even if we believe that someone has passed silly parameters to a call site, like the parameters made sense,
Right.
let's not fail.
Fair enough.
Awesome.
Yay, we did a thing.
Okay.
Happy with that?
Yep.
Sweet.
Exactly.
So it's sort of like from encoding and to encoding, but it may not be a from encoding.
Yeah. Okay.
Alright, so this was the only blocking issue, and now we can go all this to news again.
Hooray.
And of course this shit pops up in the wrong browser, because why would it pop up in this one? Um,
Do we have APIs on SafeHandles today anywhere?
Not a lot. Especially not things that are instance or extension methods.
I'm not understanding what issue this is working around.
So this
Don't we
is-
have these on file info, which don't require streams?
So this is, I already have a file open, I already have the handle to the file open. I don't want to go back through the OS to do a full path lookup on a file in order to get this information from it.
Right. So like get last access time is on file and it's static. So we could just we could overload that string one to take a safe file handle
Yeah.
and not make extension methods or need a new type.
yeah, I think extension methods on a handle seem very wacky to me. I would not do that, I think. And I agree with you, it seems most logical to overload the string-based one. I'm not sure how common these are, but I can buy the argument that the file is already open, you don't want to have another
Yeah.
Especially
Particularly
if that
when
could
you're
be
near the file.
expensive.
Or if you're at the U limit on Linux.
yeah. How does this work for non-Windows? Do we have is a safe file handle meaningful on Linux? Can we actually make it work?
It's meaningful. It just wraps the file descriptor. What's less meaningful are the creation time APIs, which only in rare situations are we able to actually do well. But I would still do them for consistency.
Yeah, I mean, but whatever behavior get creation time of string has, essentially we would just write that to, it opens the file handle and calls the other one, but maybe doesn't.
Right. I mean, in when we can, we return the stats birth time from the file, but otherwise we return. I can't remember where we landed. I think it's like the newest of the read and write times,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
or the oldest of the read and write times, something like that. I
so
forget.
we've already defined what it does, and then the only situation would be is if we can't get that data from the FD, which I don't remember if we can or not.
We should be able to. It's just a question of whether we call fstat versus stat.
Okay, yeah, as long as fstat has it, then, I mean, somebody can make a file handle that fstat fails on, like it's a pipe, which actually might still have that data, because everything's a file.
I mean, you
handler.
can do that. We'll just have to determine like what to do in the case where we're unable to. Like, if someone can create a safe file handle around an arbitrary pointer.
Right.
We just have to define what the behavior is when this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the fstat will presumably fail and set error no, and we'll throw an IO exception.
What about get
Presumably.
attributes? What about get attributes?
They didn't ask for that.
I know they didn't, but like it's the only other thing
Yeah.
that seems in the same.
If just as a random side thought, like, can we drop the UTC suffix from these if we return a daytime offset, and just get people in the habit of using daytime offset instead of daytime?
Yeah, normally I would agree with it, but it's always sucky
as
when
an
you have-
overload,
Yeah.
like having the file handle one return a datetime offset and then string one return a datetime feels
Okay.
like consistency in the signature
Sure.
seems better than
Just-
just datetime
Yeah,
offset.
yeah. It's just, even with that consistency, it still pains me to see daytime being added to new APIs.
Yeah. I agree. It's a good point. But
Do we have any safe file handles that are not like file system files?
Presumably a mem-mapped file would be a safe file handle.
Yeah, it's actually got its own safe memory map handle, but I mean, you can create a safe file handle around an arbitrary pointer, so you can create one for whatever you want.
Yeah.
In fact, there's logic in FileStream to deal with that.
yeah. Anyway, like the answer is all of these things will have a behavior, and it's whatever that behavior currently is. Like you can pass the path to the mem map representation in the dev file system, and it'll do something. Presumably, that's what wrapping it as a safe file handle would do, because it should be the same place.
Great.
All right, so let me just paste this.
So yeah,
over.
so I don't know what a file attribute is.
So system IO file then, static methods. They'll just be overloads.
That is attributes.
Void. What are the names?
Right, so if we're doing the attribute ones, the only other interesting thing that I'm seeing is, do we want, like, does it make sense to do, like, read all text from an open FD?
I mean, it might, but that seems like a really different
Yeah.
scenario at that point.
Okay.
What's FD?
File description.
Motherfucker. Okay. Yeah. Apparently, we named them all differently, so I now have to last access time, UTC, last write time.
Do we want to put these on file, as in expose them that publicly?
Well, where would you else would you put them?
They're just overloads.
This isn't on file stream, the instance. This is on file the static class.
yeah. But it's like text to file.d or text.
Well, but we, like, it's already file.getLastWriteTime of path.
Yeah.
And now we're adding file.getLastWriteTime.
Oh,
of
These are
file
these are overloads of existing methods.
I see.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
Because get access control we don't have in core, and then get attributes.
I think the only other one I would consider here is literally the attributes one, because attributes seem pretty core-ish. And
And we do have the get attributes method we do have in core. So, but I don't like what is a file attribute.
Very philosophical.
A bunch of things that don't make sense on Linux. Okay.
all right,
Steve, do you know what we do for get attributes on Linux?
Steve, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Nope.
Okay.
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you know what file.getAttributes does on Linux?
Yeah, it consults things like stat to fill in what it can.
Fair enough. 'Cause
It also makes up some stuff.
I guess it can answer
Yeah,
that it's a directory. That would make sense.
yeah,
but
it fabricates things like hidden from the name. If there's, if it's prefixed with a dot,
okay.
it knows whether it's a directory or not, stuff like that.
Okay, but it has a behavior, and we'll make
It has a
overload.
behavior that is not as, it has a behavior.
Yeah. Okay.
That said, may not be. I was just thinking it through. Things like hidden may not actually be the same. Like I don't know if we can look up a file path from like file name from file handle, especially with things like links, and we use that to determine things like hidden, because whether it begins with a dot or not. I would say it's just someone tries to implement it, see how far we get, and if we're comfortable with where it lands, we go with it. If not, we remove it.
That's fair.
So you're saying we should do attributes then?
Well, because apparently we can get things like the name by if you call read link on proc self fd and then the file descriptor number, that will give you that's a symlink to the path the file had when the fd was opened. So you can get the name it had when it was opened. Apparently, according to Stack Overflow. So some of these things may be possible just with a little more work.
Okay, let me just add this. Set attributes. Where is this guy?
Yeah, if we find that we can't make it work, then I'd rather not have the overload than have a PNSE. And then wait for people to convince us otherwise.
Alright, then let me go back and edit this. Alright, seems you're happy.
Great.
That's funny. Eva, you're up again.
I am.
Apparently a few years ago you filed a lot of API review requests.
Yes. Oh, yeah, this was, so I actually have one that would make sense to do at the same time as this. There are APIs right now, interlock.add, interlock.subtract, blah, blah, blah. Those are great for doing integer arithmetic. Sometimes you need to use bitwise manipulation as well to say, I want to atomically set or unset a flag from a shared field. This is done, ASP.NET uses it in a few places. I pointed out, like, hey, Task does this as well. Yeah, that's really all this is. Add bitwise APIs.
Should we also have a bit test and set? I don't know if that's portable.
I don't know if it is either. Tanner, you might be the best person to speak to that. Would bit test and set or bit test and reset make sense here too?
Give me like 5 seconds to check. I believe that they are lockable.
Time's up.
So one of the other things that is nice about this is the implementation of this could actually be smart depending on the call site. For example, on x86 processors right now, if you wanted to call interlock.and, for instance, and get the result back and then do something with the result, we would have to generate the loop for you, which is fine. We can at least do that and save you having to write that logic yourself. If, like system threading task, you just want to and something, but you don't care about the result, then the JIT can emit a simple lock and operation. That's it. There's no loop necessary.
So you're imagining these will be intrinsics?
Yes. They would be implemented based on whether the caller cares about the result as a loop or as a straight up intrinsic. That's already what every C++ compiler I looked at does.
If we're okay with implicitly generated loops, then I would definitely be for bit test and set.
So the only way to do this, at least on x86, if you care about the return value, is to generate a loop. There's no instruction that will do it on your behalf.
I think that's fine. I mean, that's how immutable interlock also works, because there's obviously no way to do certain operations without doing a loop.
Yeah.
We wouldn't actually generate a loop, though, right? We would have these be implemented as loops, and then if the JIT saw, we would also have them annotated as intrinsics, and if the JIT saw that it could replace it with something better, it would, right?
Yes,
but if
correct.
it was a loop, it wouldn't replace it.
Correct. The default implementation would be a loop unless the JIT said I can do something smarter. But yeah.
Right.
That seems fine, yeah. I mean, location 1 seems odd, but just check. That's apparently what we already had in the
those
other
match.
APIs.
Yeah.
We also don't have any of the unsigned types.
So there is another API review that I want to do right after this, which is let's add the unsigned types everywhere.
So you want them for add, decrement.
Yes. Because otherwise you have to do unsafe.as,
Yeah. So
which is not good.
add with carry and bit test clear, bit test reset, bit test set, compare exchange 8-byte, 16-byte, decrement, increment, negate, not, or, subtract with borrow, subtract, XOR, and XAdd and exchange are all things that x86 and x64 support.
I think we have like 80% of them, if my...
Yeah.
So
which
Levi
ones are
was
missing?
asking about bit test clear, bit test
Well,
reset.
Corey was asking about that.
Corey was
Yeah.
asking.
I knew x86 supported it. I was more curious if we'd have to do something weirdly inefficient on ARM or something like that.
If we would, we could check, but if we would have to, then it wouldn't be appropriate to expose here, I think.
So maybe what we can do then is open a separate issue for bit test clear, bit test reset, bit test set, and then just spend a little bit of time going over that separately and then bring it back to review.
That seems fine to me, yeah.
Yeah, but let's
We're
do
saying
that as a separate
we're
issue.
okay with some of these creating loops of compare exchange behind the scenes, right? And
Yes.
presumably
There's
those
nothing
aren't
behind
supported
it.
on ARM.
But that's what I'm saying. There's nothing being created behind the scene. These are fully implemented methods that are based on loops. If the JIT can do something better, it would. But
Yeah.
if you're calling this, you're calling a method that does it as a loop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and by the way, everybody who wants to do bitwise manipulation now already has to have that loop in their code. So we're not changing the code we're not changing the actual x86 that would have been generated, for the particular scenario. We're just saying, hey, we're not making you write that loop anymore. We'll do it ourselves. That way you can just call this API and it'll do the right thing. Oh, and by the way, if we have a chance to optimize it even further and remove the loop, we could try doing that within the JIT.
Yeah, because like today, if you're on a 32-bit JIT and you do interlocked compare exchange with ulong, that's implemented in the JIT as a loop.
Yeah. But the nice thing is, when I'm writing my application, I don't need to worry about that implementation detail. I just call the interlocked API and it does the right thing. And that's the spirit that these are done in as well.
It isn't called
In
compare exchange.
in what
8 bytes.
situation?
Sorry, getting off track.
Steve, you were asking?
Never mind. I answered my own question.
Okay.
Okay. Glad to be a rubber duck.
Who's filing the test reset bar? Is that Levi?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, I'll just tag you on it.
Right. So the other proposal that's somewhere is for these as well as the existing add, decrement, increment, and compare exchange to add uint and ulong.
Yes.
24694.
What about? I don't know what interlock.read is. We only have that one for long.
I think
I captured it.
I think interlock.read internally is interlocked compare exchange with the existing value in one of the spots.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
When would you use that?
When you want a read barrier, when you want an actual memory barrier around your read, but you don't want to mutate the value.
Okay.
Which honestly, in some weird scenarios, could have undesired side effects because it's not purely a read.
Yep. Fair enough. But so I don't know if that one needs a ulong variant or not, or if that was a 32-bit leftover.
The reason this got held up for a few years is because there was another proposal for an actual atomic of T class, similar to what C++ has. But that hasn't gotten much traction, so I wanted to at least get this through because it does have immediate value.
Yeah, I mean, even if we add the other one, I mean,
and then the other one, which you found and linked to, is okay. All of this, but for unsigned as well.
yeah. Let's review this one immediately afterwards. So are we happy with this one as it is? I said test and clear reset because I heard these terms thrown in one, but I don't know which combination.
We'll figure it out.
So my only, I think I missed if it was asked earlier, but we have int and long because that's the ones we currently expose. Many platforms support byte and short as well.
I don't think we have that anywhere else. So.
What we should,
right, but there's I've seen lots of people complain that like for example, if you want to do something over a bool, even though it is a byte under the covers and the CPU supports it, you have to instead store it as an int if you want to do atomic operations.
Then what we should do is if we want to support other widths
Separate
of data
proposal?
types, maybe not a separate proposal, maybe with the one that's coming up, because the one that's coming up is adding unsigned variants of all of these.
Yeah.
Should we also add 1 and 2 with variants of them, assuming we can implement them properly?
The problem I have with that is I don't know what you do on platforms that don't support it.
The same thing you do with long. You implement it
CompareExchange.
differently with a loop.
Uh,
So we already guarantee in the runtime that updating anything that is naturally aligned and smaller than the pointer size is an atomic operation. So updating a byte is an atomic operation, guaranteed by the runtime spec already.
Yeah, but we don't have an interlocked write for long. That's the concerning case.
What platforms would not support byte and short atomic operations? Because it looks like x86 supports it. I see the instruction.
Yeah, and ARM supports it. I don't think there's any platform that we would support with the JIT that wouldn't. There would be too many potential breaking changes with that.
Yeah, as long as there's no platform where we might find ourselves needing to write a full, say, word in order to write the byte, I have no problems with it.
Is there a compelling need to support things like byte and short right now? Like I get it, we can do it because we can. I just don't remember anyone asking for it right now because these were based on actual, like, going through the code and seeing, oh, the code can benefit from this.
I think it's a case of, like, there's likely use cases, but everyone who's encountered it has had to use int today. Like, I know there's been places where I've had a bool and I've wanted to do an atomic update on it. And, hey, I can't because it's a bool. Although I think for bool in particular, there's reasons because it's not just 0 and 1. It's 0 and not 1, which you can't do atomically.
Yeah. I mean, it's useful for anyone who has them as fields and you don't want to use the wider one to have your struct more compact, right? That's the hard where it sucks.
Yeah. I'm just, at the moment, having trouble thinking of a scenario. I'm sure they exist. It's just a failure of my imagination.
Can we keep it separate? Let's just get this one.
I was
through,
about to
and
say,
then-
I mean, file a separate issue for that. I think the one that is linked here also talks about a generic one for structs, I believe.
I don't think,
Yeah,
at least not the one
German
that,
structs. Yeah, that's what it's. Oh, sorry, you can't see what I'm seeing.
yeah.
That is never helpful.
Oh, yeah, I ignored the generic struct aspect of it.
Yeah, which is fine.
'Cause I don't know what that means.
We can scope that out.
Just scroll all the way down.
I was about to say the same
Yeah,
thing.
that's a proposal. So the stuff at the top's what's already there. The stuff at the bottom's what's being added. It's literally a carbon copy with unsigned everywhere. And CLS compliant false. Presumably, since we just approved add or XOR, we would do add or XOR here as well.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
If I'd caught you before you'd hit the approved on the other one, I was going to say we'd actually table that one, do this one, then come back. And
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is I have it still here on the clipboard, so it's easy for me to merge them.
And there's discussion earlier about how it saves people from having to use temporaries or call unsafe APIs or what have you. Especially since these are ostensibly safe.
Right, and since it's just updating memory from the native side,
Yeah.
we can just reinterpret cast it to
Yeah.
the same size sign type
Exactly.
and do it.
Like
Which is
I'm
the
not-
workaround for anyone
yeah.
who doesn't have these today. Like you just
Yeah.
use unsafe as.
Right. Yeah, I'm not. The thing is, I'm not smart enough to implement add or XOR. Presumably, U10 or someone else can do it. I just filed the issue. These I'm confident I could actually implement myself if I needed to.
Do you use /star for single line comments, Levi?
What?
Do you use /star for single line comments?
Not always.
It's like,
So I use /star instead of region
oh,
because you can't collapse them.
you said the evil word.
Had I not had multi-line comments, there would have been a region around the before and a region around the after. You're welcome.
But / is just strictly better than.
So even if we had this generic type, atomic of T, you would still want these APIs as is on Interlock?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
The thing about atomic of T is, in C++ in particular, like C++ uses templates and specialization, and we have generics in C#, which means that the implementation of atomic of T would be really mind-bending in .NET, which we could still do. It's just really mind-bending.
The C++ atomic is super, super complicated as well.
And then I assume that for the part of this that we're ignoring of the any other generic struct, that would have to be splittable,
Yeah, I don't know what it
And-
means to atomically update a generic struct.
and that we would do the same thing that CompareExchange long does on a 32-bit system of do multiple reads and multiple. Like I don't even
It's
know.
not atomic though.
I don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
Because, well, I guess I don't know how we did CompareExchange long on 32-bit systems.
If I remember correctly, it basically does a compare, and if it's true, it does the exchange, and it continues doing the exchange until the value it reads is the value it expects.
But now you could have another thread see a torn struct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
so it's not atomic.
So on a 32-bit atomic or
Anyway.
interlocked CompareExchange is not actually interlocked unless everybody, like, as soon as one person does a dirty read, they can witness a shared state, which makes sense if you're doing anything fatter than the CPU.
Compare exchange long should be implemented in a single instruction on
on 64-bit systems.
x86.
Not all 32-bit systems, especially when the JIT was first written, had CompareExchange 8-byte, and I don't think we
Yeah,
have
but
support
I
for
think everything we support, the operating systems we support
did you hit
require processors that have
go on
compare
this?
exchange 8 bytes.
Yes, but I don't think the JIT's been updated to use it.
Had you typed a comment on this or?
no, I have not yet.
Okay.
I mean, I can post what I have so far.
Oh, I heard you type and I thought you were typing into this. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm typing in my text editor.
Yeah, seems fun. Not the generic struct. But
Yeah. Let me add a comment on that one. Actually, let me not post this here because then my life is more miserable than it needs to be.
So we can't do generic struct. CompareExchange and
It seems like it's a different proposal than the one that we were talking about right now, which is
Yeah, you'd have to do like an atomic ref update, which isn't really exchanging the struct. You're exchanging the pointer, and at that point, we should just have a CompareExchange pointer overload,
Yeah.
or maybe an unsafe API that does it with refs.
We already have, by the way, a compare exchange overload that takes pointers basically,
oh yeah, 8 pointer.
because you can turn a pointer into a ref.
I would be interested in a separate proposal of how to compare exchange 2 pointers at a time.
I know there's at least a Windows API for that, but I don't know how it's implemented in Ruby Hammers.
The CPUs support it.
Okay.
I think the first AMD CPUs did not support 128-bit exchanges, but everything after that did.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
not.
I'd be very interested in that as well if we can implement it everywhere. We have data structures that could really benefit from it.
You
Yeah.
can't implement it on a 32-bit machine. It's not available.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's definitely
Yeah, thanks for updating that, Emo.
Well, you can compare two pointers on 32 bits as well.
No, they're asking about compare exchange 16 byte for 128 bits.
Oh yeah. You couldn't have a 16-byte, but you could have a 2-int pointer struct somehow, something like that.
2 pointers is 8 on a 32-bit system.
Correct.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay. I feel like I've hijacked this API review today. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm getting so much special attention here.
Notably, a thing that's missing here that might be worth adding is int pointer and uint pointer. Although we might want to say wait until inint is out and then expose it on that.
That is one of the things that I was hesitant about doing for Exchange there, because I added compare exchange and exchange of uint pointer because we already had ref int pointer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So which ones are new? The exchange one?
So and or an XOR of inint and nuint.
Because so realistically, every single one of these, if you had inint and inuint, is just if 32-bit use the int overload, if 64-bit use the long overload.
Are nuint and uint pointer like equivalent?
They are at the JIT level. They are equivalent. The compiler is going to add an attribute to say that when you look at me from the compiler's perspective, view me as an inint and expose the operators. But they are identity conversions. So you can do like int pointer x equals inint value.
Have we made a decision what we do in the BCL? Because we can't overload, right?
Yeah, there will be no overloading.
Will we change some of our int PTRs and uint PTRs to be inits?
I don't know what we've said about that as a breaking change. I think we said for certain return types it may cause confusion and
Yeah. I mean, like for these, the question is what semantics do we want, right?
Yeah.
But it seems also like it may not matter. Worst case, the person has to do a cast, right?
Yeah, a cast here is not the worst thing in the world.
I mean,
Yeah, I think given the fact that we say that they should be treated as that int pointer should be treated as a pointer and init should be treated as an integer, then for compare exchange where we already have int pointer, it's fine. But for the others like add and decrement, we probably want to make those init explicitly.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we can bring that proposal up when inint and nuint are
Yeah.
closer to
Yeah.
production.
let me add a note on that one.
And that we could also handle. Actually, that would be a really good thing to bring up at the same time as the other widths of decrement and so on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the ARM manual here, and at least on ARM64 they support
Yeah. Perfect.
everything that we've talked about here.
Just like UTF-8, do we have an init label that we could add to issues that are relevant or no?
I don't think so.
But,
How are we tracking it?
the init one
Tanner's
seems like
got it.
it'll go through on the nod. The size one might.
Yeah, I imagine we should talk to people like Jan to see what they
Yeah.
say about the other types as well. They may know about some platform that Mono supports, for example, that doesn't support that for whatever reason.
Sure. Okay.
And if that's the case, then we could look at exposing some intrinsics that do it.
Yeah.
Because for example, ARM64 has support for atomic min-max.
Okay. Had to wrap my mind around that one. Sure.
Yep. But x86 has no concept for that, so.
Moving on.
All right.
Just saying that they're two different proposals with different expected success.
Yeah.
So. I have a
Sweet.
re-review if we want to get one easily, or we can just keep going in date order.
I was just about to hit the next one.
Easy reviews make us feel warm and fuzzy inside.
I mean, what is yours?
You want the number?
Yeah.
29588.
295.
88.
This thing.
I don't see it. Is it Is it marked ready for review?
It wasn't marked ready for review when the meeting started. It is now, because I had to go back and apply the label.
I still don't see it. Why is that?
Are you runtime or core
295.
FX?
29588. No, it shows up. I don't know why it didn't show.
So we talked about this while you were off gallivanting in the ocean, Emo.
Gallivanting around the ocean. Now I feel so much more productive.
So I have the
There's a wall of text. How is that easy?
yeah.
Scroll down. Just scroll down.
Scroll, stop.
Oh.
So this is
Here, I'll thumbs up it for you.
yeah. This is updated based off the feedback from last time. So everything's based on ranges instead of spans. So we no longer need it as a ref struct, and everything that said size now says length. So it's always span.length is what gets passed into it. And in the PIM fields, what used to be like decoded size is now decoded data length to show that it's mapping to the base 64 data range instead of to location or label.
So for context,
Yeah, can you summarize the journey a bit?
so yeah, so for context, the idea is that you're given a buffer of text and you're basically running a glorified parser over it, and the parser is telling you, here's a snippet where some interesting data was found inside of this text, or inside of this data. The original proposal was returning a ref struct that contained read-only span of byte, where that read-only span of byte was a reference back into the buffer that you'd originally given it. One of the changes that was made after review was, instead of returning a ref struct, like Jeremy said, return ranges now. That way, we just tell you, here's where the interesting chunk of data began and here's where it ends. That way, if you need to do something like go from a memory and then slice a memory of T as opposed to a span of T, well, you can now apply the range to that. Or if you have an array, you can apply the range to that, and so on. It's a more versatile API now.
Why is the constructor internal? Any reason for that?
So that only the find API returns one?
Yeah.
But it's a struct, right? I guess you cannot set the things.
Yeah. I mean, we could make it public.
Is there a scenario where find and try find only look for specific label or base 64 data only and not the rest? And therefore, calling find and try find and creating a struct is doing a lot of work. Like let's say I'm only looking for location. Is there a scenario for that where I don't care about label or base 64 data or?
No.
Okay.
If you're looking for PIM, you're looking for PIM, and you
Okay.
want to know, because if you're reading PIM, which is that's the file that starts with 5 hyphens, the word begin, a kind of thing, and then 5 hyphens, then a new line,
Yeah.
and then a bunch of if you have the file that has a bunch of things concatenated together, either you're only supporting the first one, in which case, yeah, you don't care about the label, but you may care about the other things, or you want to make sure that the label is the one that you are looking for, and so then it's just like, that's why it takes read-only span as the input of like, if you didn't like this one, slice past it and pass in the next one, and it'll find the next start.
And just to clarify, decoded data length is the number of bytes you would get back
If you
after
call
calling
convert
dot.
from
Yeah.
base 64
Okay.
on base 64, or on the
Okay.
slice that is base 64 data, that is the number of bytes it would produce.
Got it.
So it subtracted all the new lines, the non-standard new lines, the spaces, and the equals.
One of the other nice things about having the constructor internal is if we wanted to add fields in the future, we could without really breaking the API.
Yeah. Do we expect to have fields in the future? Because let's say we have 10 more fields, the constructor will become, even if it's internal, really large.
I mean, the struct would be too
Equally
big
large.
at that point, but yeah, I mean, like we can make it public. There's no, I don't remember why it was.
I mean, usually why you want to make constructors public is because structs are usually pure data holders, and there's no reason. Like usually for testing, it's just easier if you make it public.
Yeah, I think maybe we were looking at it as like, if it has the internal constructor, then it's never wrong. Like no one could have built the wrong one. Only the API that can produce this produced it. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
just make it
I
public.
guess if there's no caller, why push to make it public? If there's no
Because
scenario.
pure data holders you usually make public, because then you can construct them and compare them. Like it's a pure data holder. Like you're not impuring any sort of penalty for that.
So we'll just make that public.
And we want them to be immutable.
I guess the real problem is, right, it's as a
Structs
pure
are
data
also-
holder, you can easily, like, what should anything do if you've created one and the length actually doesn't match the base 64 data? I mean, if you mutate the data after, underlying data after calling parse, it'll be wrong. But otherwise, if you're building one by hand, like, we then need to have a semantic that says like, oh, -1 means no one, like this wasn't pre-calculated, and you have to just figure it out. You're like, it has two things that are interrelated, and making it public means that it's just more prone to being in an erroneous state.
Hold on, let me do it. Okay. The constructor isn't public to avoid having to validate while formless.
We could always make it public in the future if we had to.
Presumably, get encoded size takes label length and adds it to whatever the data length times base 64 encoding factor is.
It does the correct amount of math.
There's the math's more
It's
complicated.
a math
than that.
operation. There is no processing. Just based on
That's why it takes lengths.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's a little more complicated than just addition, though.
I see.
So presumably, because we don't make the constructor public, we don't care about it implementing IEquatable.
Yeah, like I don't know why you'd ever compare these things.
I mean, if you can't construct one, it makes sense for testing, right? But like, if you don't construct one, you will never find two that are probably identical. So what's the point, right?
Yeah, I don't think we thought at all about IEquatable, and you weren't here last time, so no one asked the question. But
I mean, virtually all structs where we didn't implement it, we eventually ended up implementing it. But
yeah, we can add it.
If we never, yeah, I just added as a question. I can decide
We can add
if
it.
it's super strong.
It's easy.
And then this only ever works in UTF-16.
Currently.
Yeah, the decoding is from UTF-16.
So what happens if we add support for UTF-8? Does the structure of the PEM fields have to change, or is that already taken care
You're
of?
still responsible for understanding what the original data is that you're slicing.
Yeah.
But location label and base 64 data are
Ranges from the span.
so they are byte offsets. They're not.
They're just ranges.
They're ranges.
The
Sure, but the
yeah.
expectation is they can take that and slice and then get the legal data.
Your
on
input
it.
was chars, so they're char offsets. If you give read-only span of char 8, then they're char 8 offsets.
That's what I mean. So they're not byte offsets. I mean, they are byte offsets, but they're also
They're
it
T
sounds-
offsets.
it
The
sounds-
UTF-8
yeah, right.
string type has an indexer which accepts a range, and it will do the right thing.
Let me just do.
Yes. It's in the proposal as it currently exists, the particular values for start and end on range are opaque.
So API try write and write is the data. Should it be called base 64 data? Data parameter.
Not base
It's
64.
not-
Yeah, it's binary data.
It-
It creates
it will get
base
base
64.
64.
Yeah.
So what is the base 64 data range?
Okay, in a PIM field,
Yeah.
in PIM,
Yeah.
you have a header,
Yeah.
then you have base 64, then you have a footer. This is the range that represents the data segment. It is base 64 encoded. We haven't decoded it for you. You need to go deal with that.
The point of PEM encoding is to take binary data and put what's called ASCII armoring around it. And the idea is you can now take that and shove it into an email message or something like that. And that means that the output of PEM is text.
Okay.
Like it's actually something that is human readable.
So that data
means
gets
privacy enhanced mail.
Yes.
Because that was the RFC that defined it.
Yeah.
So that
So the
data-
output's going to be text.
Okay.
So
So-
chars.
So, but base 64 data is basically the range over the text representation of the base 64, correct?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So,
So
if you have
if
a
you
buffer
want-
that has some
yeah.
base 64 text in it, and we've said, from here to here is where the
Yeah.
base 64 stuff was. This is what you passed to convert dot try from
Right.
base 64.
Yeah.
So if you want to get the actual data, you slice it to the base 64 data range, You pass it into our base64 decoder, and then you get the actual bytes.
Yep, and the number of bytes
That's
will be
easy.
decoded data length.
Yep.
Clever, right?
Do we need char consumed or data consumed on try write? We have char written to the destination.
It doesn't.
It'll
It
consume
consumes
everything.
everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
If it doesn't consume all the data and all the label, that throws.
it-
Well, if there's not
the
enough
only way it
room.
would do that is if it ran out of memory.
Yeah.
In which case, it's a
Like
Yeah.
you said, you want to write something down. It's going to write it down unless it can't make an array big enough to.
Think of it like convert.to base64 string. Like it will consume the entirety of the input data, and if you're calling the spam-based overload, it will return false, saying the destination was too small.
Yeah.
Or if you're calling the string-based overload, it will just throw out of memory
There's
exception.
no like partial consumed data.
Yeah.
This
And
is the data you want to write.
Behavior for invalid label. Is there a
Invalid
case?
things throw
Is there a case where the label could be invalid or incomplete?
the empty string.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do we do for that?
Throw. Or if it starts or ends with white space, throw.
So the only time the try write returns false if the destination is too small.
All things that are called that look like try write are only allowed to return false if the destination is too small.
Cool.
Every other thing must throw.
Cool.
sweet.
Yeah.
All right, let's close this one then.
Yay.
So we have now approved an API that returns ranges. I am going to have a field day with this.
I wrote it in the book already.
I
Great.
mean, why would we not? I mean,
You're going to regret giving me free hand over this.
Christoph, it was funny when he got to that section. He's like, "Have we ever done this anywhere? Like, this seems. Why are we adding this rule?" And then he got to the conclusion at the end. He's like, "This is a good rule."
Let me read these few
It's
paragraphs.
like let's stop returning or let's stop making 4 overloads of everything.
I would be interested in reading that part down.
all right. So
This is one that you, Mo, have previously said we should review as a standalone API, and we've still not scheduled it because
oh,
it's
this is this big thing.
Yeah,
Here.
it's
Okay.
pretty
Okay.
big.
Never mind. Yeah. Okay.
because it's basically mirroring an existing API but with a new concept.
Maybe
So-
we need a label of Emo should schedule a meeting for this.
Yeah, I was about to say. I think we probably need a label for that. Which,
A label being
API ready for
complicated.
MO
Or you can assign
scheduling.
it to yourself.
Yeah. Like we probably need a label for complicated
Yeah.
feature review.
Maybe API ready for scheduling.
API
There's a
dash complicated.
design label.
we
if
have
you
hard
want.
problem, but that seems a bit over the top.
There's a design label if you want to put that instead.
No,
Design
I want
discussion
something
sounds
like
like-
API needs meeting or something.
Yeah.
But like for now, I think the easiest fix is actually to assign it to myself.
Sure.
This
Actually, that would work if the pattern is ready for review and assign it to emo.
Yeah, I think that's probably not a bad idea.
Okay.
All right. I mean, it works great if I ever lead the team, but.
And we could just black hole everything.
It's like how to make progress in a nutshell. All right, so where's my other tool?
As long as you don't leave GitHub, it'll be fine.
Oh no, when I leave the team, I will just make sure nothing is assigned to me because fuck this. It's called the GitHub rich quit. So then
We've seen this in action before.
I was about to say we had people on the team who nuked their GitHub account, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we can go.
Mark,
And he was very adamant that when he walked out the door, he was deleting his account, and he did.
And that's totally fine.
grab the pitchfork. You're up again.
Oh, just click that link. It's great.
What the hell?
Why would I click on that link?
Because it takes you directly to the comment that has the API proposal.
Following 50 redirects now?
No, it's the same issue, just a comment in the issue.
Oh.
So there is, on binary reader and binary writer, there are protected methods that allow you to read and write 7-bit encoded integers. And I know I've written wrappers around these. I imagine millions of other people around the world have too, because oh my god.
I think I've done that too,
Is
yeah.
this
Yeah.
the like CLR constant structure?
No, I don't know what you're referring to.
I don't know either.
I thought that like literals inside the if you're using the metadata reader to read back literals
It
or tokens
probably
or
uses
something,
this to some
uses
extent.
the
You're right.
if I fit in 7
what I
bytes,
used to
I
do.
lose 1 byte. And
Yeah,
if I fit in 4
that's
bytes,
exactly what this is.
Yep.
But in order to do that, like everyone has had to write that logic themselves, or has had to write a wrapper around it. And this is just saying,
Yeah.
let's just make it public.
Wait, why put it on binary reader and not on system reflection metadata, which I think already has that support?
No, because the encoding is popular. It just happens to be used inside the CLI
okay.
metadata as well, and that's where most of us encountered that because we apparently read metadata a lot.
Yeah. So first off, there is an internal method right now, a protected internal method, read 7-bit encoded int. Like, we could literally make that public.
Yeah.
I believe taking a protected method and making it public is not a break and change.
Is a break and change.
It is. It's not virtual.
If it's not virtual, it shouldn't be, because how
Right.
you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Protected virtual is because
Yes.
then you said protected override, and it's
Yeah.
and C# says, but there is no protected virtual.
But
here.
because it's not virtual, making it public should not be a break and change.
It's like, dear Anders, override should replace the access modifier. Go back 20 years and fix that.
Yeah. So the simplest proposal is literally just to take those two protected methods, make them public. This is a more advanced proposal which supports 32-bit, 64-bit, and big integer.
I mean, I can get behind the long version. Big integer seems...
I think
Do we care? There's no big
So-
integer support anyway on binary reader and writer. Why would we add it for 7 bits?
Yeah, and I'd rather see it as being able to write opaquely to a span and then having us expose the big integer array as a span in some capacity if possible.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, we need to decide on big Indian versus little Indian representation because we lost the
Yeah.
semantic wrapper.
Sure.
Well, this always assumes big Indian when it's reading and writing.
But once it, like, when it's returning big integer, it's
Oh,
big
sure,
integer.
okay,
Like,
sure.
big integer happens to be little Indian because
Okay.
it wants to be big.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not just making the protected bigs public because we're fixing int to int32.
Which we could do. Yeah.
Yeah, well, which I was going to say it's called int, and that violates our native
Where
list.
the fuck?
But
If that
the proposal has it correct.
if that forces us to create an artificially new API, would we just take the hit on naming and just make the public, protected and public?
Interesting.
Because it'll still be there. We can't remove it. It'll still be a
It can call
public
public.
API.
Right.
One of them can call the other. The JIT can turn that into, or the JIT can turn that into remapping the function table.
Oh. I mean, one would call the other, of course. But
Yeah, I wasn't talking about from the internal perspective, but just from the user seeing APIs.
I get, yeah, because I guess
Protected is sort of public. in
is
that-
it
Yes.
actually protected or is it internal protected because it's somewhere wrapped inside an internal structure?
No, it's
it's-
protected.
Yeah.
A user's internal protected isn't it internal or?
Well, if it's a protected thing inside an internal class, then
yeah,
it's
yeah.
then it's not in public metadata.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess really the question is, does it show up on APIs of time? And it does. But it would be weird if we had the one for long that we have int and then 64, which isn't normal. But since the name is already encoded int,
Although one of the questions would be like, how often do people subclass binary reader?
I said I'm in a broken statement.
I've done it before, literally just to access this API. And I imagine quite a few other people have too.
Right. So in that case, maybe there's value in just making it public.
I mean, if we see it in
I mean, if this were public, I would call
this
that
method
solid.
appears in 2% of API port telemetry.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't rename it.
Right.
And then the question is, would we rather have write 7-bit encoded int, write 7-bit encoded int 32, and write 7-bit encoded int 64, or skip the one named 32 and just have the one with the wrong name?
It's used 42% in Xamarin Labs.
Yeah. Probably part of the template.
You're signed in.
So how do you? So I get the one that we can't fix the one for 32-bit. Are you saying for 64-bit we do the same thing?
Well, for 64-bit, we obviously need the suffix because we need to disambiguate
Yes,
the
good
methods.
point.
The question is, do we make the protected one public, which is not, since it's not virtual, that's not a runtime or recompile breaking change,
Right.
or do we make a public one that is correctly named? So only people who extend the class see the one with the incorrect name. And I am so conflicted that I refuse to have an opinion now.
So
I have an opinion on
I
this
can
because I
make-
think the problem is in practice you can't hide the thing.
I can
Because
make
it shows up in docs and other places, so I would rather just reuse the existing name rather than having all 3 versions.
I can make a straw man argument as to how making this public would break, and that's if someone used reflection to access it.
Yeah, screw those
don't
people.
It's protected. You can use public
Yeah.
reflection to access protected numbers.
Okay, if you're in the fence, that does sort of break the tie of adding and.
No, I agree with you.
I mean, if you call this API with reflection, I mean, come on.
Well,
Because you didn't want a subclass binary.
But if standard public reflection would find it, then that means that you would probably be calling it without specifying any flags, and then it
Right.
would continue to find it. You'd
Yes.
have to be explicitly saying, I'm only looking for the
No, you
protected."
would explicitly have to say, I want private members only.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or I want non-public members only.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which honestly, if we actually concerned about these things, we should consider fixing that in reflection. Basically saying, like, if we can't find anything, and the visibility basically somebody asks for non-public, scan for public as well and return that. If we really care.
Right.
Like, I think to me, this is like, I would not butcher the API reference just
Yeah.
because somebody may have done something crazy in reflection.
I would also maybe edit a browsable member this thing. Existing code won't change. The
But
evil one.
We'd still have to, like, Emo's point is we'd still have to have it up on the doc site.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
it's a publicly callable thing, and
Yeah.
then we have 3 of them, and it says, this one is protected and has an old name,
Yeah.
use the public one.
Okay.
And quite frankly, I mean, I don't think the pattern is super bad because, I mean, it's the same thing we did with other things like process where we
Okay.
added 64-bit versions afterwards just to have more.
Right, but we do have
Sorry.
there is an explicit guideline that says don't say the word int.
Yeah.
In a API, say int32.
Yeah.
And,
Which, I mean, this is violated.
right. And
We
so
can't do
it's-
much about that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So read 7-bit encoded int, read 7-bit encoded int 64.
Yep.
Okay. And then
Same on
with
the
right.
right, yeah.
Yeah. And ignore big integer for now. And they all become public.
Yeah.
And we're doing big integer as well?
No.
No, we said ignore big integer.
Okay. And what was that?
We don't have anything else that
Yeah.
covers big integer. Big integer is sometimes shipped in a separate library from these files and many other reasons.
Yeah.
It'd probably be better to expose a span overload and then expose some way to
Yeah.
get a span from a big integer.
Works for me.
But yeah, then it would be a. Yeah, like that, because that one would be super weird because you would give it a thing of like, and I really hope that it's, that it fits in 64 semantic bits, and it'd be like, nope, it kept going. You're like, fine, try again with a bigger, and it seems super niche, and that you may want to like. You
Yeah.
just scan ahead and find where it stops and then do it yourself.
Are there any other types of bit encodings that might be relevant?
This is the only one that's really interesting. That's on binary reader, binary writer.
I mean, this one's already here.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there are
Please stop making me extend this type just to access this protected number.
Yeah.
there
that's what
are
it is.
other more compact encodings, but whatever. Like if you look at what I think if you look at what Protobuf uses, they have like a more clever encoding for being able to represent negative numbers as well within 7 bits most of the time.
Yeah, that zigzag pattern is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So going from protected internal to public is fine, correct?
Yes. Fan of the zigzag pattern, Cody? Great. Or Corey? Cody.
Obviously,
Yeah,
you just
it's
combine
nice if
Corey
you need
and
negatives.
All right. So then I consider this one done.
Hooray!
Let's close this guy. Okay, is this one a big one too?
It's a big number. This is more of the ARM intrinsics
Oh.
that we should have a dedicated session for.
Okay, then I also
It's
add
been so
myself here.
Yeah.
If I can spell my own name. Alright. Easy reference equality API. Okay, that sounds easy. Levi, you're up again.
Great. So the downside to this was I went through, like a few days ago, I went through a bunch of APIs which had a proposal and just weren't marked ready for review, and then marked them ready for review. So there we go. Reference equality compare. It's equality compare that just does referential equality, as opposed to equality compare of t.default.
Interesting.
Yeah,
All
we
the
have-
existing
I've written one of
compares-
these myself in the past, so I would have used it.
We just added it for JSON as well.
Perfect.
Similar, very similar. Let me.
But it's a reference equality, yeah.
Yeah.
In your case, was it I-equality compare of object or I-equality compare of some other t?
I believe it was object.
Okay.
Yes.
But why is it not the same as
It's like a pair of T, but then we use it for object.
equality compare of object or default?
That will call object.getHashcode and object.equals, which invokes the virtual getHashcode and virtual equals
Oh.
method. So like two strings, for instance, could have the same contents but be different references, whereas this would say, no, they're actually different.
So what is get hash code returning here?
It returns the sync block index of the object.
So I pasted the link to the default reference equality compare that we use within JSON.
Yeah.
And I think this will do it exactly that.
Yeah.
The only difference is we have interface implementation, explicit interface implementation rather than implicit.
I guess I could have had the subclass equality compare of t instead.
I was about to say, I would probably put it in system collections generic, and I probably would add a field rather than a type. I would probably have another field next to default called reference. So you would say equality compare of object dot reference, and then, because why would you ever need more than one of those guys?
Well, so equality compare of t dot what?
Reference. I would just add a field next to default, where you just get the one.
That field presumably returns the exact same equality compare for regardless of which t you pass in. Because equality compare of t.default actually returns a unique thing per t. And if we have something that's expected to return the exact same instance regardless of which t that's passed in, then it doesn't necessarily belong as a field or a property on a generic type.
That's fair, although we can cheat, right? You can have an internal type that holds the instance and they all point to that guy.
It does, but the JIT now has to work extra hard because every single
You just
equality
create a field.
compare of t that the reference comparer field is accessed on needs its own instantiation at JIT time. Sorry, I probably explained that poorly.
No, I know what you mean. It makes sense. It just pains me to add another type.
It does, yeah.
And then, especially when it's in the wrong.
Is that the reason why we don't want to make this generic?
Well, it doesn't need to be generic
Yeah.
because it always operates on object.
I mean, by definition, it's only for classes. By definition, because you have reference equality, like you're
Sounds good.
independent of the
Yep.
T.
Because I-equality comparer, I believe, is variant. Yes. I-equality comparer is of in T. So you can take an I-equality comparer of object and literally turn it into I-equality comparer of anything, as long as anything is not a value type.
So, something. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
But like you can pass this to a dictionary of string anything, for instance.
yeah.
You could pass it to a dictionary of person anything, and it would work just fine.
Can we then just add an equality compare non-generic that sits next to equality compare of T?
We could.
It really seems weird to add it to the non-generic namespace.
Yeah, let's add it to the generic namespace then.
I mean,
That's odd though, isn't it?
Yeah, but equality comparer doesn't exist in system collections either. Like if the type would already exist, it would make sense, but if the type doesn't exist there.
Oh, that's the other reason I didn't subclass equality comparer of T,
Yeah, the
because
type
then variance doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we frequently will have a non-generic with same, or with,
Yeah. As a factory
with
bit.
like a root name sitting next to the generic.
We do? Okay.
I mean, like, there's, for example, tuple.
But then would you make it a
has
type
Just 15 overloads of create.
that you
Sorry.
can actually instantiate? No, right?
What do you mean? No, there's a singleton instance on there. It's not instantiable. It's sealed and has a private constructor.
Oh, right. Private is you can't create it, and sealed is you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not. Never mind.
Right.
Going back to my whole.
So then let me propose something here. I mean, of course, nobody cares about those. Let's put it in.
Null argument disallowed.
Yeah.
What's the reason for that?
Because iEquality comparer of T dot get hashcode of T is documented as disallows null, except for that's not always enforced.
I mean, equality of compare T's get hash code allows.
I know. I was trying to make a change yesterday where I had equality comparer of string.default return string comparer.ordinal, because why shouldn't it? But they treat nulls differently,
Yeah.
and this would have made substantial improvements to dictionary's performance if I could do this.
The string one's probably because of the ill-defined treat null and the empty string is the same thing.
No, so string comparer does the right thing. It disallows null. Equality comparer of T.default allows null,
Okay.
even though it's documented as disallowing it. It's fantastic.
I guess it would have to do something because you can have null. No, you can't have null keys in a dictionary.
Nope, disallowed.
Okay, never mind.
So
Back to my
is
whole.
there a benefit to try to be consistent with an allow null here?
I think the point was pick a thing.
Yeah.
He can be consistent with that.
I'm
You can't be consistent with all
picking the
things.
documentation. I'm picking what the doc says, as opposed to the behavior of equality comparer of T, which we don't subclass.
What did we put on the interface?
The interface says disallows null.
Yeah. So we're matching the interface.
Does iEquality compare of object inherit iEquality comparer?
I do not believe so, but let me check. It does not.
Fuck. That's unfortunate.
It is, isn't it?
Because then, what does reference? So okay, let me just show the API I currently have.
Do we have the non-generic iEquality compare?
We do.
Yes, we do.
Sources dot net doesn't find it.
Oh, actually, I didn't check. I mean, that might explain why it doesn't extend. Which would make sense. Yeah, actually, there is one. Yeah. It's a system
Alright.
collections here.
Yep.
I don't know why the source index. is not finding
Source.net
it.
doesn't find it for some reason, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so then
So why not make an explicit interface implementation for get hash code and equals? Explicit.
Why?
Why?
Otherwise, this type would have no methods on it.
Oh, okay. Yes. So the whole point
Yeah.
is.
I mean, it implements this one interface and this one interface only. We may as well just make it an implicit implementation.
Okay.
That way you could do like reference equality compare dot instance dot equals or dot get hash code, and it flows when you type it out.
So let me show what I have. So
You've introduced a new type equality comparer.
yes, because we need a new type, clearly, right? And we said we want to just follow the existing pattern where we have a non-generic overload next to equality compare of T.
Do we need the non-generic one? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm confused. Where else would you put it?
Do we need the non-generic interface? Like what?
Oh, yeah, I would do that because if anything takes an inequality compare that is non-generic, then what are you doing it?
Fair enough.
Like then you have to,
It just makes it easier to use.
yeah.
I don't know if I would introduce a non-generic equality compare type, though. I think that would be confusing.
But what would you return? You need to return an instance that is both inequality compare inequality of object.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Well, that's why I had proposed a reference equality compare in the
Name.
API proposal. Like, are you actually introducing a type literally called equality compare?
Yeah, it's an overload next equality compare of T.
But equality compare of T is an abstract class that people are expected to subclass.
No, people just access it to access members usually. And
No,
members
it
usually-
actually is an abstract type.
I mean, you can, but most
Yeah.
people just don't do that. Most people just say reference, equality compare of some type dot
Default.
default. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the pattern I try to follow. But that's why I said it's unfortunate. I would rather, yeah. But I guess that you have to expose it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, having it be sitting next to equality compare of T seems a little odd though.
Well, but no matter what you do, it would sit next to it.
No, if the name has reference equality
Yeah.
compare, then it's explicit that this is something different
Yeah.
than does the equality compare of T.
The fact that the name is so similar but the behavior is so different is what throws me off.
Well, but that seems fine because if you subclass it, you define the behavior.
You can't
If you-
subclass us, though.
Sure, but like the other one is like if you subclass it, you define your own behavior. If you don't subclass, you just get the default behavior. And so here's basically
Yeah.
you'd say you get the reference because you access that guy.
The other nice thing about having a standalone reference equality comparer type is that you can literally say if incoming comparer is reference equality comparer, do something. Like special case it in that regard. Not that you should, but you could if you wanted to.
You can equals it against equality compare dot reference. Same functional flow, just different code.
Yeah.
Well, assuming that our behavior is for all time, that reference returns a singleton.
What I mean, I would say yes. Why would you do anything else?
Well, because that's an implementation detail.
Now having a
But a very
property,
obvious
if
one,
a
yeah.
property returns a different value on every call, it's not supposed to be a property. So we would need to make it a method now and document that we don't, or you do or don't
We
get
could,
to depend on the.
for instance, have a property that returns a thread static.
I mean,
We've done it before.
I mean, like, let's keep in mind implementation is trivial, and it's kind of not implementation detail, but pretty obvious because you compare two addresses in memory.
Yeah.
That's the semantic.
There's no
you have.
state, so it would,
Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
we wouldn't need it.
But I guess what I'm saying is we would be telling people we're not exposing this implementation detail via the API surface, but instead you can take a dependency on it through these other mechanisms.
Sure,
That
but to
seems
me that
strange.
sounds the same as like array.empty, right?
Array.empty isn't guaranteed to return a singleton.
Pretty much.
It's not guaranteed to do it.
Wait, but this is the API, aside from the name of the type, this is the API you proposed.
This is not the API I
Yeah,
proposed.
the only change is that the name, we changed the name of the type from reference
Well,
equality
right.
compare to equality.
Right. And I think changing the name implies very significant differences.
Okay.
That's a problem.
I mean, so the reason I like this is because it's less concepts, but
But it does introduce the fact that, like, a lot of times you have types that are generic versus not generic, and they're very similar. It's just that one is generic.
Well,
Here, that's not the case.
normally when we have non-generic and generic types living next to each other in the same namespace, the non-generic has factories for the generic type.
right,
Yeah.
That's almost always what we use it for.
which this kind of is
It kind of.
because it's a fixed factory for a fixed behavior, right? Like
It's not a factory for the generic type, though.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right, because it's returning a thing that doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't extend the generic.
I mean, yeah. I don't know. It seems more logical to me than reference
Yeah,
equality
I mean,
compare.
certainly if you search source .net for reference EQ, you find a lot of people who have named types reference equality comparer, or one called reference equals equality comparer.
Because if you have to create your own, like that's the most logical thing to do. You can't.
Sure.
It seems weird to call something equality compare when it has one specific behavior for the thing you instantiate, right? I mean, the question is, what if you would ever have to add something that is non-generic? What would we do?
What do you mean?
Like,
For the old type, the
yes.
other type. If you want to have a non-generic equality compare that has the semantics of the other type.
So if we wanted a reference property, I would rather put it on equality compare of t than equality compare.
With the downside that you instantiated for every single chart.
With the downside that it gets instantiated, but we might be able to work around that at the JIT level.
We won't, because we wouldn't care. JIT changes are expensive and difficult.
Yeah.
They need to be worth it. We would never say that that was worth it.
Sure, fair enough.
Yeah, unless you can find this a significant performance issue, you probably won't do it.
It's also a little strange to say equality compare dot reference to mean it's going to do reference equality.
Yeah, like
The property called reference is.
I would say that would
Sure.
need to be called, reference equality. Just
I mean, that's fine.
reference
I mean,
is a
one I
standalone
care
word
less
here.
about. It's just that
breaking
it's
my
just
head.
from the flow standpoint, it makes more sense to me.
You're outnumbered, Emo.
So what do you want to call it then?
In reality, I like the original name better and original property name.
Right.
Reference equality compare.
The other thing I will say one thing to keep in mind is given that people have a plethora of types named reference equality compare and that they're trying to get this behavior, there is a possibility that we're going to put them in that this is going to introduce a lot of source breaking changes where people have put it in a utility type and now two different using imports are importing a type with the same name. So by picking everybody's already picked the best name. So maybe Emo's thing is better because no one will have named it this.
I mean, the logical conclusion to that, though, is that we can never introduce types with good names at any point ever in the future. Which, I mean, is that's fine as far as we're all concerned because we don't choose good names for anything we do.
Right.
So,
I'm just, I am pointing out that is the one, the one downside is people, when they're building and, as they start to upgrade, that this would be a weird type conflict.
Right. Do they have generics or non-generics? Because I saw in mono it's reference equality compare of t. This will be non-generic.
Link expressions is of T and Windows base is not, and XAML is of T.
Why would they do of T?
Reference equality compare of T extends I equality compare of T. Because they don't think about every class instantiates to the same generic.
Actually, that's a good point.
In the runtime, if T is a reference type or is a reference type, then they all collapse to the same implementation.
So I equality compare of T is variant.
yes.
So I can downcast I equality compare of object to I equality of foo.
Yes. That cast is legal.
But it also makes it now more awkward for people that, let's say, instantiate a hash set and want to pass an equality comparer
Reference equality compare dot instance.
with a cast, because otherwise it's
Don't
not.
need a cast. Just works.
Because generic.
I don't think that's true.
New hash set of
Because you'd say new hash set of customer.
yeah.
So the second argument is now give me an equality compare of customer.
An I equality compare of customer.
So an I equality compare
Yeah.
of customer, and if you have an I equality compare of object, that's not compatible. You have to cast.
You can pass in an equality compare. You can pass in an I equality compare of object. It is legal to do that.
Yeah, because that would be the variance as an argument.
Yeah, it's implicit.
No, it would be the other way around, right? If I have an I equality compare of customer, I can assign it to something that is I equality compare of object.
No, other way around. It's contravariant.
Yeah, it's variant.
Let me check. So you're saying it's marked out.
It's marked in because it takes t as an input parameter. If it returns t, then yes, it would be I equality compare of customer could go to I equality compare of object.
Did I not see this in API for that? Yeah, I don't see it.
So I just looking, it's variant. I don't remember Go versus contra.
Well, the question is which direction is legal.
It will work. Like if you do a new hash set of customer and then pass in reference equality dot instance, it will just work. You can't pass it in for hash set of int though. That will cause problems.
Sorry, they changed the doc sites and I can no longer find where the API docs are. Where is it? Search. There's a search bar.
IEnumerable should be, if I remember correctly, co, because it's an out, not an in.
Yeah, so that would be out,
Yeah, and this is in.
and then equality compare would be in. Yes. I think you're right. All right.
What namespace is high quality compare of key in?
Collections generic.
Yeah. So, but to the point, like, if somebody defined it as reference equality compare, upgrades to core 5,
Yeah.
let's say, they get a compiler warning probably.
An error.
So if they've declared it in their same namespace will win with no warning. If they've declared it in a utility namespace that they've done a using import of, then now the same type is visible via 2 using imports.
Yeah, that's
Declared at the same
yes.
level, and
That's
therefore
right.
it is ambiguous and compile fails.
So, but either way, like, I mean, whether it's a warning or error, that to me is mostly irrelevant because you change your code and then you make a decision which one you want to use. But I would say, why would you ever use your own?
Maybe
If
your own
you're-
handles nulls.
You're split compiling.
How would you handle nulls differently from what we do?
We forbid nulls, maybe you allow and return 0 for get hash code.
Why would we forbid nulls?
Because the API is documented as forbidding nulls. And because
The interface does
yeah,
it too.
the implementation that we would have just call straight into the runtime, which can't handle nulls.
So object.reference equals throws if either outside is null?
Runtime helpers dot get hash
Get hash
code
code.
throws if the input is null.
Oh, for hash codes, yeah, that's fine. But like you should be able to compare nulls with this.
Oh yeah, that works just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Equals takes object question mark.
Yeah.
Get hash code takes object.
Yeah. It's assumed that
Don't
get
call
hash
get
code.
hash code if you unless you know it's not null.
It's assumed that get hash
Sure.
code's only really used if you're like hashing keys in a dictionary, and you really shouldn't pass null in that scenario. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, that one seems fine. But like,
Yeah.
we can check in sources.net, but I'm pretty sure they're just.
Oh yeah, equals allows null.
they're-
It's
they're-
just fine. It's
Equals
fine.
allows
No, I
null.
mean like what other people have done, like does WPF
Oh, they allow null too because they call object.reference equals same thing.
The one
for the hash code one.
XAML does not because it calls runtime helpers get hash code.
So
The one that was
equals.
currently on my screen was runtime helpers.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 5 different implementations internally. All of them allow null for equal. None of them allow null for get hash code, and we would have the same behavior as all of them.
That's what I'm saying. To me, it sounds like I would always delete mine and then use the framework provided one because
Yeah.
it's clearly the semantics I want.
In fact, one of the 5 that I'm looking at has the wrong implementation for get hash code.
No, Windows base. Windows base is not calling. Is not calling runtime helpers. It just calls o.getHashcode. So it's the wrong null. It's the wrong null reference exception.
By the way, I tried this thing for hash set, and it works fine for hash set of customer.
Yeah.
So I quality compare of customer.
You had an inequality compare of objects
Yeah.
and it passed
Yeah.
just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we should go with the reference equality compare thing, and not
Yeah.
make it of t, just make it reference equality compare. Dot
Yeah, I mean
instance.
that's
Yep.
basically,
Yeah.
and then you would just call the property instance, I suppose. Right?
Yeah, and that's your singleton right there.
Yep.
Yes. And then the option that is, I think, more sane than this one is just doing on equality compare of t, because all t's that are reference types would hit they collapse into the same generic instantiation. But I think it's cleaner to have the reference equality type. The reference equality compare
Yeah.
type, non-generic.
I don't have a strong preference between the two.
And because most people seem to have implemented it as a generic, they're not going to get a type conflict because one of them uses new with a T and the other one does not. So,
What does runtime helper or get hash code do for null object?
It throws an exception.
okay, something bad probably.
Let me double check that before I commit. It's supposed to throw null.
Yeah, but is it argument null? Is it null reference? Is it? Does it just exit the CLR with invalid program?
On
me tell you, I hate
mono,
that
it
one.
crashes.
I hate that one. So, Jared would love that behavior. It's like calling Belfast.
It returns 0. Great.
Okay.
Whatever. I don't care.
So you lied, and you,
I
you
lied.
do support that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Whatever.
I lied.
Documentation says don't give me null. Something happens.
Yeah.
I care very little.
So in the implicit implementation, I would just say, I would mark it with a question mark and say whatever, we allow null.
For
In hash code.
wait, why?
Because it turns out runtime helpers allows it.
Oh, I see. So we go away from the interface, right?
Is that true on? I guess it doesn't matter if it's true on framework because we won't just type that. So.
What does it do for that? For null, does it return 0?
Return 0.
Okay.
Alright, so typed a bunch of stuff.
Not documented as such.
That's
Interesting.
again.
It's also not documented as throw.
Alright. Did it update? Go away.
And we don't say it's 0. We just say it gives the same output for the same input.
I am so very sad now.
Are people happy with the nodes?
You forgot the methods. Equals and get hash code.
Well, I mean, they're just, you have to implement them, right?
We'd implement them implicitly. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I mean,
This
it
is
doesn't
another-
matter that it's explicit or implicit. I mean, it's like, it's just, it's basically the same signature, so then what's the point, right? There's no, you don't
Because
really
it's
have.
not right because we are changing the ability of get hash code.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying we should specify the methods.
Yeah, I mean, the guideline
Sure.
on explicitly implementing interfaces is don't do it unless you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not trying to
or
say we should do
not
it. All I'm
doing it
saying
would
is
be
I'm not
confusing.
bothering with an API that is effectively
This would be
inherited.
not confusing, and there's no technical need, so we should not. It should not be explicit. It should be implicitly conforming to the interfaces.
Yeah.
Even if nullability is
No. Screw it. Runtime helpers.get hash code says I don't accept null, so I'm just going to leave the same annotations on this API. And if it accepts null, whatever.
Yeah, but there's no point
the
in
interface accepts null though. The I quality comparer of T.
Does not.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, I'll just keep that same annotation. And if it accepts null, it accepts null.
Yeah, I think the method should be visibly declared and implicitly conform to the interfaces, because there's not a reason to make them explicitly conform to the interfaces.
Yeah. This is going to introduce some fun breaks.
That way, nobody, or if somebody feels like writing reference equality comparer, or reference equality comparer dot instance dot equals, and like they'd get through dot and they'd be like, there are no members on this. They'd be like, what? So like, there's no reason to hide the members.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
Yeah.
I also don't think the nullability annotations matter because nobody will ever call them.
Yeah.
No, but the behavior of get hash code for when you pass a null object is important.
Yeah.
Sure, but I honestly think given that you never call the APIs, or you pass the instance and somebody else calls the APIs, but the other person calls them through the interface, like they're effectively meaningless.
Yeah.
Like you have to, basically it's documentation. By that point, you might just document the behavior on the
No
time.
one would ever call reference equality comparer dot instance dot equals because we would just call reference equals.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a much shorter way to do the
they
same
might. That's the thing. Like, they
Yeah.
might not realize that reference equals is an API they can call.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, but anyway, there's no reason. There's no
Yeah.
reason to hide the members,
Yeah.
so we shouldn't.
So we just what documentation will we put for that API?
We would put doesn't allow null.
Well, I mean, the documentation will probably, like runtime helpers, simply not talk about what happens if you give it null. The metadata says don't give me null.
Yeah. All right.
That was fun.
Activate the right window.
And that's noon.
All right. So we are out of time. Sweet. Then thank you everybody online, and then see you next week, I think.